73 receptions, and then 14 touchdowns. Trying to catch touchdowns at that size inside of at the red zone or in those situations is extremely difficult. Most of his touchdowns, 7 of his 14 touchdowns, have come past the red zone, meaning those are receptions of over 20 yards. That's huge. You can't get the type of production that you get throwing to a receiver. He's just, I mean, I'm not going to say his stats are amazing because they aren't in the small sample size. But what we have is during that small sample size, he has had higher levels of effectiveness than any other receiver in the last 14 years on that small of a sample size. Now, listen carefully. I went ahead and looked at what quarterback rating is when people are throwing to him. He has 97 pass attempts, 73 completions, 1,023 yards passing, 14 touchdown passes, and when he's been targeted, 3 of those passes have turned into interceptions. Okay? 2 of which were completely not his fault, as they were drastically overthrown. That's a quarterback rating of 135.43. Holy cow. That type of rating efficiency has not been done for 14 years. And the person who did was Randy Moss. Cricket.
Damn it, mute again. I'm not saying, look, you made a decent case. Doug Baldwin, and I'll give you that. I think top 5 receiver this year, sure. I don't consider that elite. I think you have 1, maybe 2 elite receivers in a year. That's maybe 1. To consider someone elite, they need to be legitimately elite and the best receiver within that class for a couple years. They need to show that they can do that. So, I mean, yeah, if Doug Baldwin had 2 years prior to this doing the same thing, I'd say, yeah, great. That's amazing. Sure, I'll put him in an elite status. He hasn't had that. Secondly, you have to look at how many passes they throw. This team is a run-first offense that's typically getting their yards on the ground. Can you compare him to a team that throws twice as much as the Seattle Seahawks do? No. You can't compare the same kind of thing. So I'm saying, and I mean, hey, we've kind of laid out our arguments. I say Doug Baldwin is good. I think he's had a great year. I don't disagree with that. I think a lot of it is scheme. They don't have anyone else to catch the ball, and they don't throw a ton. So, and the other thing that I'll point out is this. If we look at games, I was just looking at their schedule. He hasn't really played any elite corners either. He hasn't played any shutdown corners, so we don't really know. He's played typically pretty terrible defenses. So I think a lot of things have conspired to have him have a great year. Do I think this is a guy that can do it year after year? No, I don't. And I don't think he's elite. But tell you what, Jock Stars, you tell us. I need you to help us decide this. Text into the show. All you have to do is elite or not elite. That's it. Let us know who is right in this situation. Are you going to draft? And this is the other thing, elite. Nash, are you drafting Doug Baldwin in the first round next year?
Of fantasy draft?
Yep. Is he going in the first round of fantasy drafts? Because Antonio Brown and Calvin Johnson Calvin Johnson still went in the first round of last year's.
Wide receivers don't typically go first round.
1 or 2 of them will. You know who will? The elite ones.
I would
Antonio
put him in,
Brown went in almost everyone's league.
If Doug Baldwin's available in the 3rd round, I'll pick him up. From the 702, who does agree with you, he says, 2016 bold prediction. Doug Baldwin scores less than 7 touchdowns next year. Okay, so maybe my point has not fully
Vegas
caught
getting
on.
at us.
Yeah, I guess so.
I like it.
So maybe the concept of what Doug Baldwin is hasn't fully caught on, and maybe I'm just reading into statistical anomalies that are across the board here, and maybe I'm just looking at a very small sample size and jumping the gun. But for
maybe you're Homer Simpson.
But for 2015, we have a damn good receiver who's been very effective for his team. We've had Marshawn Lynch go out. We've had Jimmy Graham go out. And then when Doug Baldwin became the 3rd option, all of a sudden that team just started winning. and Doug Baldwin's stats went through the roof. He and Russell Wilson have carried that team on their backs into the playoffs.
And Thomas Rawls.
And Thomas Rawls doesn't even play for the last 2 games. Has been broken, and that's what and Doug Baldwin has continued to step up and show what he's more and more capable of with the absence of a running game.
Lockett helped that team in a decent number of games as well. Not even just receiving, but in the special teams. And look, I'm not saying Doug Baldwin isn't good. I'm not saying everything you just said is absolutely correct. But here's what happens. Nash gets a halfway decent receiver on the Seattle Seahawks, and he's calling him elite. I think it's Homer Simpson. You're a homer sometimes. That's why I called you Homer Simpson, because you're a homer at times. This guy's he's decent. I'm not saying he's not. That'd be like me calling Macklin elite. The first 1,000-yard receiver we've had in a while. He's elite. I'm not going to throw that out there because elite is not something you just casually. It's like, you're that guy that says I love you after 2 weeks. That's not a word you just throw around. Elite's the same thing, right? It's not something you throw out there.
Tell me you believe that Doug Baldwin is not as good as DeAndre Hopkins.
No way. Not a chance.
So you agree?
We would have. Hey, I say there's not a chance that Doug Baldwin is as good as DeAndre Hopkins. I say on that same team, you get DeAndre Hopkins on the Seattle Seahawks. He doubles him in yards and touchdowns. I think that you put Doug Baldwin on the Houston Texans, he doesn't show up for anything. Doug Baldwin isn't a guy that goes out and beats elite corners every single week and consistently shows up. I just don't think it is. They haven't played they haven't played amazing defenses. I just don't. I think a lot of it is scheme. And I think a lot of the reason he did well this year is he's underestimated. No one expects him to do that well because no one's heard of Doug Baldwin. No one cares about Doug Baldwin. And it's not that he didn't have a great year, but you know what happens? Everyone watches tape on him, and you know what they do? They whoop his ass next year because they've all watched tape on him. No one's watched tape on Doug Baldwin before this. They watched the tape and said, cover this receiver. It wasn't even Doug Baldwin. You need to cover this guy. He was this guy. That's who he was. That's the reality of the situation is no one's watching tape on Doug Baldwin. Maybe now they are because he's obviously shown up. But all it'll take, and we've seen this with gimmicky things before. I think a lot of this is kind of gimmicky. Now that people know who they are, they're going to watch tape on him and they're going to figure out what he does and they're going to be able to stop it. Okay. Not completely because he's a decent receiver, but he's not a DeAndre Hopkins. He's not an Odell Beckham Jr. Or if he was, guess what? He would have went way higher in the draft, and he would have come out the first couple years he was in the league.
He didn't go in the draft. He actually was an undrafted free agent. But with that, I'm going to go ahead and welcome Doug Baldwin to the show. Doug, you're live on the... No, I'm joking.
I wish you had Doug Baldwin. That would be fantastic. Because this is not something I wouldn't say to him. I'd say, Doug, you had a great year. Thank you. That's awesome. Nash is, wetting his pants over here. He's so excited to have you on the show. He loves the Seahawks, and you have really helped that team do very well. Great job. You're not an elite receiver. So that's that.
Allen Robinson, you're very hot on him, okay? But
don't say very hot. I think he's a good receiver, of course, yes.
You'd probably say he's better than Doug Baldwin. But of the 75...
I'd say that they're comparable. He's bigger and has more intangibles.
Of the 75 receptions that he had to be targeted 144 times. That's less than 50% of the time that he was actually able to catch a pass. That's a little over 50% of the time he was actually able to catch a pass. Now, the touchdowns stand together. They both have 14, and they both lead the NFL in receiving touchdowns this year. However, Allen Robinson has over 140 less yards after catch on over 50 more targets. So you got to wonder, if you're going to throw the ball, you're on a 3rd and 9, you're going to throw the ball, and you need that 3rd and 9 to be picked up. The number one receiver statistically for that choice on that 3rd and 9 conversion is Doug Baldwin. On a statistical analysis, it's Doug Baldwin. And because you are probably a homer as well, the number 2 receiver in that case is actually Jeremy Macklin. So the reality, what I'm trying to say here is, when there's a person you need to depend on, when you need that first down at all freaking costs, you need to make sure that you have that Mr. Clutch, that Mr. Dependable, that Mr. I'm going to receive the ball and I'm going to do something with it and I'm going to keep this drive alive. players like Doug Baldwin, players like Jeremy Maclin, they are the unsung heroes of the NFL. They don't get looked at because their intangibles don't have, his hand size is not 11.5 inches or bigger. He's only got 10 and 5/8 inch hand size. Those kinds of things just don't really make a whole lot of sense. And it was said last night. It was said last night by our guest, Susan T. Spencer.
Oh, no.
She says,
you
can't measure those types of intangibles. You have to look at what's in the person's heart. And nobody's got a bigger heart than little angry Doug Baldwin. Hell, he even turns out footballs during Super Bowls.
Oh, come on, bro. Here, look, by your statistics, you just said Maclin is second on that list. And I'm a pretty big homer, and I'm not calling Maclin elite. There's only a couple of elite receivers in the league, and we're not going to even – and I'm getting beat up on the message board. I can see it. I'm looking at it now. But I'm sorry, certain people – I don't think Des Bryant is elite. I just don't. They don't – call me crazy. But elite is not a term you just throw around. Elite is a very, very restricted term. Antonio Brown is elite. The guy can catch on anyone. He does incredible things after the catch. He makes people, he's amazing. So that I'll give you an elite. After that, I'm going to almost make an argument against anyone else being elite. AJ Green, I might put in that. But even then, it's like, maybe, maybe not, because these receivers can be shut down. To be elite, you have to dominate at that position. He hasn't dominated at his position. He's had a year that no one expected him to come out, so they weren't scheming against him. And he's in an offense that doesn't have anyone else to go to. I think that's what's happened with Doug Baldwin. Has he had a good year? Yes. So Jockstars, keep him coming in. Let's settle this for us. Elite or not elite? Text us in, call us, shoot an email, whatever you have to do. I like to, I love to rub it in Nash's face when he's a homer and he's wrong. So let us know about it.
Okay. With that, it's about time for us to go to break. And after the break, we're going to be talking about our Week 17 predictions. And keep them coming in on your bold predictions of 2016. The bolder, the better. And yes, it does have the opportunity of bringing you a $50 gift card. During our dialogue of the Week 17 predictions, you're more than welcome to give us a call. And we'll go ahead and answer whatever questions you might have for Week 17. We don't normally do it on this type of a short week. We just don't have enough time for the content that go all around. So what I want you to do, if you have a fantasy question, or if you have, what do you think about this particular defense against this particular offense for Week 17, this is your chance. You just go ahead and give us a call. And if you don't have the number in front of you, I'll just go ahead and tell you. The number is 405-562-5463. With that, we're going to go to break, and we'll catch you soon.
Finally, can we take a moment and stop listening to these idiots long enough to get the Cars for Kids jungle stuck in my head?
1-877 Cars for Kids. KARS Cards for Kids. 1-877 Cards for Kids. Donate your car today.
1-877 Cars for Kids. KARS Cars for Kids. 1-877 Cars for Kids. Donate your car today.
Also on the web at carsforkids.com. That's Cars with a K. We're a recognized 501c3 charity organization, so you'll receive a maximum tax deduction. What's more, you'll receive a free vacation voucher of 3 days and 2 nights.
1-877 Cars for Kids. KARS Cars for Kids. 1-877 Cars for Kids. Donate your car today.
Are you looking for the web's best sports news? Visit jockjournal.com. Sports media has lost its touch. It seems that journalists are scared to report what they see, in fear of losing access to the teams they cover. At jockjournal.com, you get inside information on the entire NFL community without all the politics or fears other writers have. That's jockjournal.com. When you need the NFL sports news, information, opinions, fantasy football, or discussions, there is only one place to go, and it's jockjournal.com.
How would you love to generate a